Okay, welcome and thank you for standing by. At this time, all participants are in a listen-only mode. During the question and answer session, you may press star 1 on your touch-tone phone if you would like to ask a question. Today's conference is being recorded. If you have any objections, you may disconnect at this time. I'd now like to turn the meeting over to Ms. Irene Skricki. You may begin.
Great. Well, thank you, everyone, for joining our webinar today. I'm Irene Skricki with the Office of Financial Education. I'm the person who's been managing the CFPB Financial Education Exchange that most of you are a part of, and I'm delighted to be bringing this webinar today to you. We will have 3 speakers, myself, and then also Sarah Baton-Kahn from the Financial Empowerment Office and Jonah Kaplan from the Consumer Response Office. We'll tell you more about their roles in a minute. So, quickly, let me just find my correct clicker here. Okay, so quickly, just a disclaimer, this is a Bureau webinar but does not constitute legal interpretation or guidance. We just need to let you guys know that. So the CFPB, most of you know, we are the newest federal agency around. We are here to help consumer finance markets work better. We work on both educating consumers, enforcing and supervising around financial product providers like financial institutions and others, and also studying by gathering and analyzing data around markets and consumers. And just so you know, we primarily represent the consumer-facing side here as opposed to the industry or regulatory side of the Bureau. Within the Consumer Education and Engagement Division, I'm with the Office of Financial Education, but we also have several other offices dealing with special populations, including financial empowerment, which is low-income and economically vulnerable consumers. One of our speakers is from there. We also have a large division that takes consumer complaints. We'll be hearing from a representative from there a little bit later. So that's who we are, and we can get our clicker to work here. Give me 1 second. And just a quick word about OFE. We are Office of Financial Education. We are trying to support and strengthen channels for delivering financial education. That really means trying to support all of you as financial educators to help consumers make good financial decisions. We also do some direct-to-consumer work and also do a fair amount of research to better understand consumers and effective financial education. And it's some of that type of research that we'll be reporting on both in this webinar and other webinars to come. I have to do a quick word about Financial Education Exchange, or FinEx. I think all of you are on this list, but we continue to grow this. We're only a few weeks old, really. We already have about 600 people signed up, which is great, and we will be adding new features going forward. One thing I also want to note, many of you got an email about this just in the last few days. We have the next few webinars planned out, so I just put them up on the screen there. It's the Consumer Complaint Database, where you can learn more how to use that feature to help your clients, and also a webinar on our Your Money, Your Goals Toolkit in September. So just so you know that those are coming. And also just want to quickly draw your attention to the resource inventory, which you can see on our webpage that has all the tools and resources we have for financial educators now. And also, I always want to plug LinkedIn, a great way for you to learn about what we're doing and also post your own resources and thoughts. And so I encourage everybody to sign up for all that. So on to today's topic. We are going to be talking about consumer credit reports and scores today, and our agenda is as follows. We're going to hear about 2 new research reports the Bureau has done looking at consumer attitudes on credit reports, and also some new research on the number of people who don't have a credit file or credit score. And then we'll run through a number of tools and resources that you can use with your clients around credit reporting. So first up is the Consumer Voices on Credit Reports and Scores. This report came out in February. And our intention here was to really understand what consumers know and think about credit scores to help us better design financial education initiatives. And so we wanted to hear consumers in their own voices talk about what they thought, understood, their attitudes, their perceptions. And so to do that, we did focus groups just about a year ago with a total of 308 consumers in 4 areas around the country: Atlanta, Boston, St. Louis, and Seattle, and really delved into what consumers thought about credit scores, what they knew, how much they understood, about a whole range of topics related to that. So this gives us qualitative insights into a broad range of consumer thoughts. We just want to be clear it's not a representative sample. It was a very diverse sample. It had a wide range of types of consumers and backgrounds, but we don't represent this as being, this is what everybody thinks. And since we screened for experience with financial products, not always positive experiences, but we screened for some degree of experience, the participants tended to be a little more knowledgeable, probably, and active with their credit than perhaps the general population. So just keep that in mind. So the kind of high-level summary is this. We found really quite a bit of knowledge about credit scores and credit reporting. I think more than I had perhaps expected based on other research from the past. I think there's a lot more awareness now than maybe 5 or 10 years ago, just due to all the things happening in financial markets. But we found areas of some knowledge, in particular a lot of interest and concern about credit scores, knowledge that credit history affects access to, obviously, to credit, to cost of credit, and to other issues like, in some cases, employment, job access, apartment rental, things like that. People seem to have a general sense that there are multiple bureaus and multiple scores, as opposed to just a single source of a credit score report. People understood in general that their own behavior had a strong impact on their score, and that some events or issues will fall off credit reports over time. But at the same time, we also saw a fair amount of consumer confusion on some of the details. People found it difficult to disentangle credit reports and credit scores. And I'm sure a lot of you have seen some of these things in your own work with clients. People were puzzled by the differences in the information across the credit reports from different reporting agencies. They were uncertain on how to access free credit reports and what sort of the implications of doing that would be. They were uncertain if accessing a free report would impact their scores. And interestingly, they felt that scores were not always within their own control. Even though they had acknowledged their behavior was a part of it, it still felt sort of mysterious to them in some cases. So just to go into a few specifics as I work on my scrolling here. Generally, we found people access their credit reports and scores in several ways. So obviously here, they could get them online through annualcreditreport.com or other sources. In many cases, people were not necessarily sure which sites would give them a free credit report or not. Some people saw their credit score on a credit card statement because a number of financial institutions are now putting credit scores or offering access to credit scores on their statements. In some cases, people were not certain what to do once they saw that score, which is a kind of an opportunity for financial education, I think. And then there were another set of ways people would sometimes see their scores or reports through credit monitoring services as a result of a data breach, if they applied for a loan and might be shown their score or report by their lender or after being denied credit. So there was a range of ways that people saw their report or score. We found that people had some difficulty in obtaining and in understanding their credit reports. So some consumers were uncomfortable with or had difficulty navigating the free site, the government sort of required site of annualcreditreport.com, which is where you can get your free report from each of the 3 major bureaus every 12 months. People were sometimes a little uncomfortable with the security questions you have to answer to get access, and in some cases did not successfully get to their credit report. And again, as I said earlier, people were unsure if requesting copies of their free credit reports could negatively affect their scores. If you do it through annualcreditreport.com, once every 12 months, it will not affect your score, but people were sometimes afraid of that, and that sometimes some folks said they were not checking their score or their report regularly because they weren't certain if it was going to have an impact on their score. People also, some people had trouble understanding the credit reports. They felt somewhat overwhelmed looking at the report. And again, not everybody, but some set of consumers. And some people were confused because they didn't recognize the names of the financial institutions or lenders or creditors that they saw on the credit report. In some cases, their loans or lines of credit had been sold to another institution. In some cases, they were just didn't. It wasn't the name that appeared on their statement, and so that caused some confusion. Okay, now next slide. We asked a little bit about what people, what they did with their credit reports and scores when they did find out. And I think one observation we had on what people said that I think is kind of interesting is that many consumers seem to have a very sort of binary sense of credit scores, that there's people with high credit scores and then there's everybody else. And people with high credit scores get good credit and everyone else just has to take whatever they can get. And people didn't necessarily recognize in some cases the fact that incremental improvements in their credit could lead to incrementally better rates in some cases. So it again presents a financial education opportunity, I think. Many consumers said that they were not sure how to improve their scores. And consumers did not report very often trying to use their credit reports or scores to negotiate around credit access or cost. It's harder to do that in a time of automated underwriting, but there were still opportunities where people said that it wasn't really working for them to try to reference their credit score, or they weren't doing it very often. So what we did with all this information was to segment consumers by their behaviors and their motivations, so we could kind of better understand the different segments of experience that consumers had. So we segmented them initially by how and whether they checked their credit report. So some folks checked regularly, some checked only in the past, some had never checked. And then we looked at the different motives there. And the idea behind doing this is if we understand why people are either afraid to check their credit or aren't checking their credit, we can better target messages and consumer education and other things we might do with consumers to address their particular issue or fear. So, for example, in the active checkers, which are people who check at least annually, some of those folks were motivated by fraud or error. There had been something, they had been the victim of fraud or error and wanted to make sure it didn't happen again. Some people were, we call gauging their progress, people who in some cases were working on credit repair or just wanted the affirmation of seeing a good credit report, and they checked fairly frequently. The other three categories in some ways are more, a target, I think, of opportunity for all of us, which is that these are people who are not checking or don't know what to do if they check. So former checkers are people who had checked credit at some point in the past but hadn't recently. Some of them felt they didn't need to know. It should say no, not now, but it's actually somewhat accurate to say they didn't need to know now either. Because they weren't about to make a major purchase, and I think they may not realize that there's reasons to check just to make sure that there's not fraud or error, or to think about credit improvement. Some folks weren't expecting a change in their credit report and didn't feel like they needed to check regularly. And some people had tried and didn't like it, so they had a negative experience. Maybe they didn't like the security questions, or they were confused, or something about it made them uncomfortable. And again, you would want to target different messages to help people manage their credit if they're facing these particular issues. Non-checkers, people who had never checked essentially, either didn't see the need because, again, they didn't feel like they had any particular financial action coming up, but again, they might not know if there were errors or identity theft. They were afraid to check, or they felt their credit was so bad that they just didn't want to know, avoiding the pain. And again, for all of those, if you're trying to encourage people to be more engaged in their credit, you would want to think about messages that would resonate with the particular emotions they were expressing. And then the last category, the passive checkers, I think is a very interesting one. These are folks who have seen their score but not by actively looking for it. Typically people who see it on their credit card statement or see it through their financial institution. In the last couple of years, there's been a tremendous growth in the number of people who are seeing their score this way. And I think it's a real opportunity to say, someone who's never seen it before, suddenly they see their score. It's a chance for I think, financial educators to say, hey, let's explore more what that score means. Let's look at your report. Let's make sure that this fits into your kind of financial ambitions and aspirations. So those were the segments. We will be working on developing some financial education materials related to those. And then just implications, again, as I've been saying, you can design financial education to meet consumers where they are with different messages that will resonate differently. obviously there's issues with credit reports being in some cases difficult to read and difficult to access, and so I think there's interest in making sure that that's as easy as possible for consumers. And then obviously here's the place where a lot of you will also be able to help out is helping people to take action. The Open Credit Score Initiative, which is this effort to get credit scores on people's statements and bills from their financial institutions, really does present an opportunity to engage consumers. So that's that research, and I'm interested over time in talking to a lot of you folks to see what ways in which this segmentation might be helpful and how you're actually engaging consumers who are working on their credit. So I'm going to stop there and turn it over to Sarah Baton-Khan from Financial Empowerment. We are going to keep going. If you have questions, you can type them into the Q&A box in the live meeting. At the end, we will open up to spoken questions as well. So I will turn it over to Sarah.
Great. Hi, everyone. My name is Sarah Baton-Khan. I'm with CFPB's Office of Financial Empowerment, which Irene mentioned focuses on low-income and other economically vulnerable consumers. And so I'm going to cover a few different slides, and if you have questions, I think we're saving them to the end. So this is about our data point credit invisibles. In May, we released a new data point. It was really an effort of our CFPB's Office of Research, but it's called the credit invisibles. Before I jump into findings, it might be helpful to talk about terminology for a second. So consumers with limited credit histories can be placed into two groups. You may be familiar with terms referring to thin or no credit file consumers. Our report focuses on what we call credit invisible and credit unscorable. And so the first group is comprised of consumers without credit bureau credit records. So we refer to those as credit invisibles. The second group includes consumers who may have credit records, but their records are considered unscorable, which means they contain insufficient credit histories to to generate a credit score. And then we further in this data point, which is available on our website, and you may have actually been sent it if you're on any of our listservs. But so we further unpack those two unscorable groups into two. So one where there's insufficient information to generate a score. You know, maybe there's too few accounts or too few trade lines to really reliably calculate the credit score. And the other segment is what we call stale. And that contains no recently reported activity. Typically, that's about 6 months, but that may vary by credit scoring company. Just quickly, we'll note, I'm not going to jump into the methodology too much, but I wanted to note that the data we use came from 3 sources. One is the CFPB has a consumer credit panel data, which is a sample of de-identified credit records. And then the study also includes census data and American Community Survey data. Next slide. Okay, so in terms of findings, key findings include, in this data is as of 2010, 26 million consumers in the U.S. were considered credit invisible. This represents about 11% of the adult population. An additional 19 million consumers, or 8.3% of the adult population, had credit records that were treated as unscorable. And again, I already mentioned the two groups, but the breakdown is, in terms of insufficient credit history, that's 9.9 million consumers, and the lack of recent history, that stale file that I had mentioned, 9.6 million consumers. So there's just two key takeaways, I think, that won't be a surprise to most of you, but I'll just note there's a strong relationship between income and having a scored credit record. Almost 30% of consumers in low-income neighborhoods are considered credit invisible. An additional 15% have unscored records. And you can see the difference on the slide between those neighborhoods and upper income neighborhoods. And then the second key takeaway is that African Americans and Hispanics are more likely to be credit invisible or have unscored credit records. So about 15% of African Americans and Hispanic consumers are credit invisible, and an additional 13% are considered or have unscored records. So one question we often get is, so what? What's the Bureau going to do about this? We're continuing to look into the data and think about strategies. I think it's helpful to note that the Bureau has many different roles in terms of thinking about access and solutions. My office, the Office of Financial Empowerment, advocates for access to credit by vulnerable populations. Irene, talked about the work that they're doing. So as they look into consumer information and tools, they're looking at specific segments, which could include the credit invisible segment. But we also have divisions that focus on research, so really understanding consumer issues up front, which is what this report does, but then also assessing the merit and appropriateness of all solutions. So that might be, how are consumers affected by certain types of data? How are lenders affected? But we also have offices that are concerned with the appropriateness of certain types of data and the accuracy of data. So it becomes a very complicated conversation, but we'll continue to look into this, so please stay tuned. Next slide. Okay, next slide. Okay, I'm going to talk about two sort of solutions or tools that we've been working on over the past, actually, couple of years. But the Office of Financial Department has been working with stakeholders to help streamline the credit reporting, the credit polling procedures, rather, for child welfare agencies. So we've worked with our partners, our federal partners, which has included the FTC, HHS, and more recently the Treasury Department, as well as nonprofit organizations that are expert in sort of child welfare issues as well as credit issues, including Child Focus and Credit Builders Alliance, to streamline the credit report polling procedures for child welfare agencies. And then also think about how to help them develop capacity to help youth in foster care who've suffered from identity theft issues or fraud or errors on their credit reports, and then also help build those young people's understanding of credit and the importance of credit, so that when they, emancipate or when they become, when they exit the system, that they have the ability to, in turn, know how to pull their own reports and then recognize errors and address those errors. So last May, we released tools to protect foster care children from credit reporting problems. So these tools included some tip sheets and some action letters. And I'm just going to quickly flag those for you, and they're available on our website, and we can also follow up. Have they been sent out to the group?
They're in the, no, not as such, so we can follow up with that.
So we can follow up and send you this, but there's 3 different letters. Well, there's 2 tip sheets. One is for parents in general, worried about their children, and then the other is specifically focused on foster care caseworkers. And, both kind of focus on helping young people start and maintain good credit. So for caseworkers, the tip sheet provides instructions on how to check the credit records of youth in foster care and how to respond if there's an error on a credit report or any evidence of identity theft. So typically, this is all streamlined through the caseworker has to work through the child welfare agency that has a contract with one of the bureaus. So it's an entirely separate process. If you are a caseworker working in a foster care system, you're probably aware of that at this point. But just note that it's a completely separate kind of process than if you were just a parent working with your child on this kind of issue.
Sarah, can you use any of these? Are any of these tools adaptable for a parent, anyone on the phone who has a client who might actually want to look into their kids' credit report situation?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Especially, I think so. The letters the tip sheets are pretty focused for both, parents on one hand and then for caseworkers on the other hand. The letters that we crafted, which I'll mention in a second, are really focused on caseworkers because we had a kind of a specific goal of helping, again, build the capacity and ability of caseworkers to respond to these issues. But we have lots of tools for parents, and if anyone's confused or needs some guidance on that, please don't hesitate to reach out and let us know. So let's see, the letters. Let me just quickly flag the letters. There are 3 for 3 different scenarios. We thought it might be easier to create the different scenarios and have tailored letters versus having one letter that the caseworkers would have to tailor themselves. But the first is for minors, where a credit report should not exist for the minors. So minors generally cannot legally enter into contracts for credit. So that means that the credit bureaus do not knowingly create reports on them. So the caseworker can use this letter, and it basically tells the credit bureau that the credit report has been reviewed and the youth is disputing all items because the account shouldn't be there in the first place. The second letter is it's similar in nature, but sometimes what happens is the issue isn't identified until the youth is 18 or over, and so some child welfare systems go to 21, and the caseworker might be working with what we call an older youth in foster care. but the actual activity happened when they were minors. So it's a similar kind of intent, saying that there should never have been a contract established with this person, you know, with all due respect, please take it off. And then the third is for issues that for youth in foster care, but it happened when they actually were adults. And so that process is more similar to what many of us would experience if we find an error in our credit report, and we just want to dispute the error because it's not correct. And so in general, moving forward, the CFPB is going to continue to coordinate closely with our federal partners, as well as others involved in addressing credit issues facing children in the U.S. who age out of foster care. I should note that we also accept complaints about credit reporting issues, and you'll be hearing from my colleague Jonah in a few minutes. Okay, next. Irene touched on this a little bit, credit score access for counselors. Some of you may have heard about CFPB's Open Credit Score Initiative. I know Irene just mentioned it. The goal of this is to help increase consumers' access to credit scores and credit reports so that consumers can be empowered. And last year, we launched this initiative and called on more of the nation's top credit card companies to make credit scores freely available to their customers. Today, more than a dozen credit card companies, as well as other lenders, provide credit scores directly and freely to consumers. So a more recent development in this body of work, and this is something that we announced it originally in April, and then we just had an update in June. So the recent development relates to sharing of credit scores and credit reports that the nonprofit counselors, so this could include housing counselors, credit counselors, other types of financial counseling, counselors working in nonprofit organizations, but it relates to the credit scores and reports that you purchase on behalf of your clients. So typically, the contracts between the bureaus and the nonprofit organizations were prohibited from allowing the counselors to share the reports and scores with their clients. And so, you know, we know that this is a barrier to working with clients because having credit reports and scores help counselors engage in good conversations with clients about steps that clients can take to improve the financial situation. So we, recognizing this barrier, we worked with industry to try to make progress on these issues, and so we brought these concerns about restrictions to the attention of both FICO and the credit bureaus. And so we were very excited in April when FICO announced that they had changed their policy and they had worked with the bureaus to change their contracts and their agreements. And so this opened the door for clients, for counselors now to share reports and scores with their clients. And also with this, so that was this kind of score issue, but this also paves the way for the sharing of reports, which is also prohibited. There's a couple of scenarios, there are a couple of exceptions where a credit bureau might allow an organization to share a certain type of score report, so for example, a Vantage score. But in general, the vast majority of organizations were not able to share the scores and reports. So we're very excited about this, and it's our hope that ending these restrictions will help empower consumers. And so I should note that there is a process. If organizations are interested in signing up for this ability to share their score, they have to go to FICO's website, and there's some qualifying information. Certain organizations qualify, and you have to kind of opt into it. If anyone has trouble finding that information or has questions about it, let us know.
Great. So that's a resource that many of the folks on the line who are actually working directly with clients may want to be able to do. So if you're doing credit counseling or pulling credit reports for your clients, you have more flexibility now. You might want to actually sign up for that. Okay, now we're going to turn to Jonah Kaplan, who will tell us a few things about both consumer response system and also some new resources that they have out. So Jonah.
Thank you, Irene. Thanks for having me. I'm a first-time guest here, but a long-time fan of the work that you do in financial education generally. I'm here today to talk about a document that we put together and manage. We've done it for a few years now, which hopefully will be of interest and use for your listeners and their clients. And then I can also talk about our office, the Office of Consumer Response. As Irene says, that's where I work, and I cover consumer reporting and also credit repair. So these are two complaint programs that we manage, in which consumers can come to our website or give us a call or send us a letter with whatever problems they're having in these respective product spaces, and we send those complaints to the companies. I can tell you more about that later. But right now, we want to talk about the list of consumer reporting agencies. What this document is it provides a list of the companies, as it says. It's not intended to cover the entire marketplace. It's intended to give readers a sense of the consumer reporting ecosystem. It has the nationwide CRAs right up top in the beginning, the Experian Equifax.
Can you define CRA, Jonah, for those of us who are not?
Oh, right. Consumer, right there on top of page 25, consumer reporting agencies, and there's also specialties, and I can tell you about those. So it gives the reader a flavor for all of the different reporting agencies that there are out there.
Consumer reporting agencies are basically the Experians of the world plus a whole bunch of other ones that most people are familiar with.
Right. So to the extent consumers know about these organizations, they've heard of Experian, Equifax, TransUnion, but what they might not know is that there are companies, niche specialty CRAs that just focus on certain parts of the marketplace. So you'll have CRAs that will just sell personal data, consumer data to banks, for example, for the purpose of helping banks manage account and fraud risk related to account openings and check writing. So that's a type of a specialty CRA. Another type of a specialty CRA would be those institutions that sell personal data to landlords for the purpose of tenant screening. Another would be for employment screening, and on and on. And the list now consists of nearly 50 companies. And what it does is it gives all of the contact information for the companies. And the reason why we do that is that the primary law that governs this space is the Fair Credit Reporting Act. And as the word fair is in there, and as a matter of fairness, consumers have a right to see who's reporting what about them. But in order to do that, you need to know who it is who's doing the reporting. And so that's what this list does, is it tells you a lot of the names out there of the biggest or bigger institutions that are doing this reporting. And it really makes it easy for those who have an interest and an inclination to contact the companies and request this information. And a lot of these companies provide the reports that they build to consumers once every 12 months for free, if the consumer requests it. So all the consumer needs to do is request it, and they will get it, and in many instances for free. So we provide that information. We try to keep it up to date. And then the other thing is, once the consumer gets a hold of the report, if they happen to spot any errors, the Fair Credit Reporting Act gives them the right to dispute that with the companies, and then the companies under the same law have an obligation to conduct, in quotes, a reasonable investigation at no cost to the consumer. And so this document really lays all that out with that information and gives that to consumers in one easy place. So hopefully the folks on the phone will see some value in that. So that's page 24, my 24. And then here Irene has some slides just about our office, the Office of Consumer Response. And as mentioned, we handle complaints. It creates all kinds of great data for us. So we're able to take that and see consumer pain points in the marketplace, and create content such as the aforementioned report, and then lots of FAQs that we write as part of our askCFPB program. That we write a lot of content working with my friends here at the table, and of course we help consumers directly by the complaints that we route to companies, and the companies provide responses, and that can be very helpful to consumers in better educating them and providing solutions to their problems. So that's that page, and page how we help. I already talked about that. The companies are responding to the complaints that we route to them. The companies have enrolled into this program, and actually that's a big part of how we can do something like the list of the CRAs, because by virtue of enrolling, the companies they identify who they are. They also provide all of their contact information, and so it's very easy to share that information. And so that's a great example of sharing data. And then we say here on the right, market-wide information. And so we provide that, and we also develop based on our complaint data. We provide a lot of very targeted reports for our colleagues within the Bureau in our enforcement and supervision areas. And then here on the next page, complaints we accept now. Well, basically, if it's a financial service or product, we take it. And so that list is pretty comprehensive. There's even a catch-all there, other financial services, and that's where you'll find credit repair. We take complaints on those. And as of the 1st of June, we're up to nearly 650,000 complaints handled. And for the program that I manage, credit reporting, I checked our public database today. We're up to over 60,000 complaints, and that's since the fourth quarter of 2012. And then finally, reaching us, very easy, couldn't be easier. You just go to our website, consumerfinance.gov, and that's where your clients, if they have an issue with a financial service provider, they can submit a complaint to us, and we'll send it off to the company and work to get a response for your clients.
Great. And Jonah, just so to reiterate what Jonah was saying, this is actually a great resource for all of you in working with clients to help people or to encourage people to submit complaints. The Bureau will actually reach out to companies. Companies will have to get back and with a response to the complaint. So it is a great tool. Just one note, though, Jonah, and we will talk about this on the webinar in a month specifically about how to use the system, but we have to be careful, as I understand it, of a financial educator filing on behalf of someone, right?
Well, yeah, and I can speak to the program that I manage for consumer reporting, credit repair. The program is eligible for third parties, so you can submit on behalf of somebody else. You just need to be transparent about it. So we'll ask questions of who you are, and as long as you complete those boxes, you're good to go.
Okay, that's helpful, because I've heard in some cases there can be issues of financial institution or saying, this is not been authorized.
Yeah. There's sensitivities, as you can imagine, at the corporate level for the companies about not disclosing a customer's PII to an authorized.
Define PII.
Personal
identifying it. Sorry, that's an inside government term, folks.
Yeah.
It's someone's private information.
Yeah. So there's sensitivities there which are understandable. So it's where the space that I work in, which is consumer reporting, the Fair Credit Reporting Act puts some pretty serious burdens on the CRAs to keep to respect confidentiality and privacy. And so the companies that I work with, if that isn't there, if that isn't in place, if they don't have confidence that who it is who's completing the document or the complaint form in this case is who they say they are, they will get very nervous very fast, and they won't respond in a meaningful way.
Great. So again, that's something everyone should think about if you have clients or people you're working with, either around credit reporting or any other financial product. The Bureau's submit a complaint function can be very useful. Just make sure you're clear and fill out the sections if you're doing it for someone on third party. All right, so just two more quick things we want to show you, just two slides. The first is we have on our website on consumerfinance.gov, there is a section of the website called askCFPB, and it is a question and answer sort of database with a lot of common questions that we've heard from consumers around all sorts of financial products, including credit reports and scores. And so they're very straightforward, plain language, easy to use and read. So we encourage you to use them yourself as needed, use them with customers, clients of yours, and they'll be a useful resource. And then the last thing I'll say is we do also have a number of brochures and fact sheets and things that are not only available for free, but you can order them in bulk to use with your clients. In the resource inventory I mentioned at the very beginning of the webinar, which you can get on our website, we list out all our brochures, but I just call attention to two of them here. These are two-page fact sheets, one on checking your credit report, how to do it, and another one on sort of how to monitor your credit report. These are just screenshots of the front of those fact sheets, but if you get to the ordering site, which you can get to through our website, you can order these in bulk. And so these, plus a few others, in fact, there's a new one that specifically on specialty credit reporting, the list that Jonah mentioned earlier, which will tell you how why and how to check with the specialty credit reporting agencies. So those are all available. So I'm going to stop here and open it up for questions. We have about 12 minutes left. I'm first going to read, operator, we're ready to open for questions. So Kathy, the operator, will tell you in a minute how to submit or how to sort of raise your hand to say you want to ask a verbal question. Once she's done that, I will read a couple of the questions that have come in via the question and answer function on the webinar itself. So, operator, would you like to guide us?
Sure. At this time, if you would like to ask a question from the phone, you may press *1. Please remember to unmute your phone and record your first and last name clearly when prompted. In the event that you would like to withdraw your question, press *2. One moment, please, for our first question.
Okay, so and while we're waiting for those, I will read one question that came in related to the issue of young people and credit reports for Sarah. How should or how can a minor check to see if there's a credit report fraudulently established in his or her name?
Okay. So the first question I'd ask is, are we talking about a minor in foster care system or a minor in general? So, and I'll just answer the question kind of based on either. So for a young person in foster care, each child, and I kind of touched on this, but each child welfare agency has set up contracts with, so there's the new law, a newish law passed a few years ago requiring child welfare agencies to pull credit reports for youth in foster care, and it's taken a few years for child welfare agencies to comply with this partly because if you can imagine, child welfare agencies and credit bureaus have very different languages and don't necessarily understand each other's processes, but there's a lot of process involved on each side. So it's taken a little while, but an agency will have typically a contract with either one, two, or three of the bureaus. And so if you are a caseworker kind of helping navigate this new law and compliance in this new law, and you're working with young people, I would first find out and of course, to complicate things, each child welfare agency has set up a slightly different process. So in some cases, each caseworker will go through this process, and in some cases, there's like a designated person in a more centralized place in the agency that does this. But regardless, there's a portal that each bureau set up, and then the caseworker would provide the information about that each child to the portal, and if there is a file, they'll send back the file. And then at that point, the goal would be to work with the young person on looking through the report, identifying the errors, and then working with the working with the credit bureau rather to fix the errors. And this is all outlined in one of the tip sheets that I mentioned on our website. So if it's a young person in general, like a parent is interested in their child, each bureau has a separate process. In general, it is good, especially if you think that if you suspect something has happened. But TransUnion, for example, has an online portal where parents can go in and they can fill out what they call the Child Identity Theft Inquiry Form. And so you fill in certain information and they'll let you know if there's a report in your child's name. And then they also have different steps and different options if you suspect identity theft. For Equifax, parents and guardians have to send documents by snail mail. So a letter explaining, that the child may be a victim of identity theft, provide a copy of the minor's social security card, a copy of the minor's birth certificate, and a copy of the parent or guardian's driver's license to an address. And then for Experian, similar, there's a number of documents, child birth certificate, social security, etc., that the parent or guardian would have to send by snail mail to the site. And then again, they walk you through the process to fix the errors.
Wow, that sounds complicated.
Yeah, which is why we developed tip sheets.
Great. And actually, before I ask the operator if we have any verbal questions, I just want to note, I know some people had some trouble getting into the webinar software. My apologies. Some people's computers just don't like it. I know some of you are listening, but we are listening without the webinar part. We do record this and we'll post the webinar, so you'll be able to see it and hear it. It usually takes about a week or two, so we'll send out a notification to folks to know when that's up. So my apologies. Not every system works with every computer, and we've run into this before. Operator, are there questions?
At this time, excuse me. At this time, there are no questions in the phone queue. Once again, if you'd like to ask a question from the phone, press *1 and record your name.
Let's give it another minute or two and see if anyone has questions. All of the things we've talked about today are on our website, along with more, and we will have more webinars coming up where we'll spend some time talking about bureau tools and other topics that I think will be helpful to financial educators.
We have one question coming in. One moment, please. Our first question comes from Gabriella.
Hello? Can you all hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. Listen, first of all, as a credit counselor for over 17 years, I want to say thank you so much. You guys have made my life much easier the last couple of years with all the wonderful information. But what really helped me a lot, and I just want to ask about TransUnion because maybe I missed it. When we were talking about the non-foster care minor check for their credit reports, most of the clientele that I deal with, unfortunately, the parents or a relative has stolen the identity. Can you help me with how we address that? Because it's very sensitive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it's something that we hear about. In the case where the young person is a minor, or when the issue happened when they were a minor, you can draft a letter that basically states that the issue happened when they were a minor, and therefore they were not able to enter into contracts legally, and therefore there should not be any activity on the report. And this works for, you can complain to either the bureau or to the original creditor, the original company that, that offered. Sometimes it's not a creditor, it's like a utility company. And typically that works, and the FTC has developed a form that you can use called the Uniform Minor Disclosure Form. I think I'm getting that right. And we have that linked to our website too. That's helpful. So child identity theft, no, I'll find it. But if you include the letter along with that form from the FTC, usually that's sufficient. And that helps, because I'm guessing what you're getting at is it becomes very very difficult. The child often doesn't want to get a police report, right, because it's a
Correct.
family member. Yeah,
Correct.
exactly. So if it's, again, a minor or the activity happened when they were a minor, this is a way to bypass that process.
Okay, because I did it the old-fashioned way before where, you know, we just had to do the letters, prove the person wasn't that age, all of that. So this is actually news to me that we have these uniform letters that I can use because, as you say, you know, even when the child becomes an adult, they don't want to press charges and do the police report and go the other route. So it was kind of tricky the last few times I've done it. We got through the situation, but this is going to help me tremendously as I come across those situations.
Yep, so you'll just have to, again, our letters on our website currently, we have general letters for disputing, but the letters I mentioned were specifically meant for caseworkers, but they could easily be tailored to someone who's not a caseworker, who's just like a guardian or a parent. And the form is the Uniform Minor Status Declaration Form. Of course, like being government, we have to make it very complicated. But it's linked on our tip sheet through our website, or you can just go to the FTC's website to find it. And that just makes it a little bit more formal, and it makes it easier for you, too, to fill it out.
Right.
Okay, so let me just be clear. If the parent is no longer in that adult child's life and we're doing this and I'm helping them as a counselor get through this process, I will be able to assist them with that letter.
Yeah. And
I'm not going to write it for them. I do it with them, and I don't represent them. I'm not a lawyer, but I just want to make sure that form will still help me with that process.
Well, so that form is actually for if the person is a minor. If they are not a minor, you were right in alluding to the fact that the adult should actually fill out the letter. You can help them, obviously, but then be very clear. In the one letter we have that it's for people over 18, but when the error occurred when they were minors.
Correct.
Mm-hmm. That one as the guide to understand how we have the language. And also, what some agencies have done, which is kind of interesting, is that if you see a trend, like it tends to be the utility company or something, then they've developed relationships with that utility company, so there's a more streamlined process. So you can send it, all the information right away, and they're ready to deal with it.
Okay.
Yeah. And then, often the stories we hear, it's like the parents want to keep the lights on, so it's hard to, you can understand it. So.
Yeah, it's not always identity theft in the traditional way you mean of a stranger taking your identity.
Exactly.
It's more complicated. Jonah, you had something else to say.
You guys touched on it, but a question back to the caller is, with your clients, you're mostly advising them and they do this on their own, or are there?
Well, in the two cases, I can be specific. One was about 8 years ago, and that was the first one I came across like that. It was a young man trying to get a house, and he wanted to make sure he was ready. And when we pulled his credit, they had it was relatives. His parents had died, and they took care of him. So the cousins, the aunts, everyone had stolen his identity. They did credit cards, cars, apartments, utilities, and it actually took us about 2 years to clear everything up for this young man. And we just did it the old-fashioned way, sending letters and proving that he was a minor at the time that it happened. And it was cumbersome, but we got it done, and he was able to get a house. But it took us 2 years to work through the process, so it was very painful.
Right, and the reason why I ask is it's related to something I said earlier about privacy, which is something that the companies take very seriously, and they might have different requirements. And so if you are acting as an intermediary on behalf of a natural person, right, on behalf of your clients, the companies will need to see some sort of evidence that you have authorization to do that. And so what that means is specific to each company. They're going to have their own requirements, and so it might be something like an executed power of attorney that you have to show them, right, a document like that. So too, through our complaint program, when a third party submits, we don't get specific about documents like that because it depends on each individual company, and so we have no way of providing guidance there except to say, which we do say, through helper text that different companies have different requirements. And so it's important that if you're going to do that, that you just have that awareness, and perhaps everybody on the phone already does since they work with clients every day, but I just thought I'd mention that.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you very much. Looks like we are actually out of time. So thank you very much for everyone who was on the call today, and my apologies to those of you who are only listening and not seeing, but you will have an opportunity to see the slides later. So thanks, everyone, and you'll get more information from FinEx for upcoming webinars that we'll have and other activities coming up. So thank you very much. We will end the call now.
Thanks.
This concludes today's conference. Thank you for your participation. You may now disconnect.